Hello. Have you been struggling on Pearl as Cypher? Are your setups a little bit boring? Well, in this video, I will be showing you the best possible setups you can do on Pearl. We've got the best cameras, juicy tripwires, one-way cages. We have it all. So, without further ado, let's begin. Alright, let's start off with the best cameras you can do on a site. So your typical default one you want to do most rounds that's nice and protected is when you're standing on this box, jump throw, boom, sees everything, sees a little bit of art, sees anybody pushing onto site. Maybe you're smoked off, you're blind, your camera will see anybody that pushes into this area. So this is pretty solid camera that you can do. Another one you can do if you want a little bit of early vision and also watch site is if you place the camera on this umbrella, like so. Now you can see whoever's taking orb. You can also clearly see sight. You can also place a camera behind this windowsill. So just like this. It's protected. It sees art. It sees all of sight. So it's a solid camera and I've been using this one quite a lot. This also allows you to clear in dugout, which is also a great camera if you are an attacker. So if you're attacking and you place your cam there, you can clear out the little stinky clown that's hiding over here, ping him with your cam and then just boom, just like this. So very flexible. You can also place a cam behind this gate like this if you want it out of the way, very hidden, so as enemies are pushing out onto site, beep beep, and they will never be able to find it. You can also place it anywhere along these pillars, so something like this, pretty good, out of the way, protected. If you want to watch a site as well as art, then there's this cam, that's fantastic. You can see all of art and you can see all of sight. So if they've got a little lurking omen that's tiptoeing around, hello, anybody in link trying to flank you, no. And then you can also watch sight, so this is a pretty consistent cam. If you want early vision when the barrier goes down, you can, oof, now you can see all the enemies standing around in this area, especially on pistol round, so you can tell your team, they're pushing A. If you want a cam that sees all of art and also sees a main, when the barrier goes down, you come up to this area behind this box, so you're protected, and you just jump through the cam in this area. You can see after they take the orb, if they're pushing, your cam sees all of this. Quite tasty, but, ooh, you can also see mid. So if someone's sneaking around, not anymore. You can pair this camera up with a one-way that I'll show in a little bit. The one-way for this camera is when the barrier goes down, you want to walk up into this corner. We're going to use this part of our HUD line. We're going to bring it up until it touches this corner right here. So the middle of it touches the corner. We throw. You get some pretty nice one-way cages. So, this cam sees, okay, there's someone mid. Ho, ho, ho.
Cage triggered.
When it comes to tripwires, there's a tripwire you should try and do as often as possible, which is this one. Just like this. You want to aim at this corner of this wall. You can't aim too high because then the trip won't actually connect to the other side. But this is pretty good. Anybody who's actually pushing from main won't be able to plant at all. And if they want to push backside, nope. Especially if it's a neon who's jumping around like woo, woo, and he tries and slides. Uh-oh. So this one's pretty good at that. Anti-neon. Also anti-Sova shock darts, especially if Sova likes shocking the main area. It's protected. If they're like killjoy mollying this, all of this is protected. Another tripwire you can do to prevent enemies pushing across this way is you see this light bulb over here. You can do a nice tripwire connected to it, like so. So they can't do anything. The only downside is if the enemies actually do get further up onto site, they can just walk underneath it. A variation of this can literally be this. A little bit harder for the enemies to get over, especially if they're, pushing this way, or maybe they've spotted you and they're coming. So this tripwire is pretty good. You see this curved corner? If we actually aim our tripwire inside it, we got a pretty nice tripwire. So if they've got a gecko that's sending his wingman in, it'll actually go underneath this part of the tripwire, pretend I'm wingman, as he's going to plant. So it's also, pretty nice. Don't place a tripwire here, because enemies can just jump over it. It's also the typical place you place a tripwire, people will just shoot it out. You can, if you want, you can place a tripwire a little bit further out. They won't expect this, so they might bump into this. Or, if you're feeling naughty, when the barrier goes down, no one's going to expect this, right? You can use these little lights across site to do some interesting tripwires. You can even use this stone slab over here if you're feeling exotic. You can get a pretty nice long tripwire like this. especially if they're just running out onto site, or maybe they don't have utility to clear these kind of tripwires. You see this stone slab over here? You can actually have some pretty nice tripwires if you aim at the bottom right of it. So this is pretty good, especially if they have a phoenix, maybe he's just flashing and running in. This tripwires are great at that. When it comes to A site, I like playing in dugout, so in this area, or I like playing back site, especially when I have cages set up like this. Maybe a cage here, or perhaps a cage on top of this box. Something like this. What this allows me to do is I can actually play in my cages. When they hit my trip, I can shoot. I can walk out if they're planting. Boom. I can use these cages to maybe hop over from here to get to here, or from over here to then run away to safety. So these cages are pretty good. This cage, I can shoot people as I hit my trips, or I can use this to just plop into art, which is pretty nice. Or you can place it a little bit further out if you want to be a little bit more protected. Then this one on top, you can shoot people. You can then walk into this one, kill the guy that's planting, cage goes down, peekaboo, and kill the enemy team. So you can actually, you know, be creative with your Cypher cages, play inside them, surprise them. Let's say the enemy likes pushing back site. Maybe they've used utility constantly, round after round, to clear out all of your trips in this area. Maybe they're predicting them. Maybe the enemy team's very aggressive. What you can do is you can actually put a tripwire like so. It just cuts everyone off. Yeah, they might be able to plant, but they cannot push back site, especially if they've got a neon or a jet or a raise. You know, people that just want to keep going forward. This will prevent that. You can pair this one up with a pretty nice one-way. And to do that one way, you can actually walk into the middle of this wall. See this blue part of the wall? Just walk straight there. Boom. And you see this windowsill? This where this plant is. There's a darker line and there's a lighter line. In the darker line, so we'll line up again. Aim anywhere in the darker line. And throw your cage. It's a pretty simple one way. And what this does is if you're playing in this area, you can catch the enemy off guard. The enemy will not be able to see you. It will be very hard for them to see you. On A site, doesn't matter where you've put your tripwires. As soon as an enemy gets revealed and you're playing in dugouts, you can actually just wallbang all of this with a medium penetration weapon or higher. So with an Odin, it's a lot more annoying for the enemy team to deal with. So you can, you know, do all of this and you can kill them. So if you want to be protected and be annoying, you can use that and wallbang from this. Just be careful, one grenade and you're going to get flushed out. So do try your best to have a cage set up here to protect you from as you rotate or as you jump away from all the violence. Some tripwires you can do for art, or when the barrier goes down, you can come and place a tripwire just like this. You can pair it with your one-way cage and your camera that I've showed earlier. So pretty solid setup. You can also, maybe the enemy team really likes playing slow, right? Or you're not feeling too confident. Then you can actually place your tripwire along this corner of this little wall that's sticking out. Like so. So enemies can take a little bit of space, but they can't actually push site. They can't get towards link. So this one's pretty good, especially if you want to get a couple kills or surprise them. So this tripwire is pretty good. If you want a slightly simple one, then when the barrier goes down, you can place your trip at the top of these stairs. Don't place your tripwire at the bottom of these stairs because enemies can jump over them. Because obviously higher ground to lower ground, you get height to jump over. If the enemy team is still pretty strong, maybe they're going from link or they're going from art and they're overwhelming you and your team, there's a nice little one-way you can do that lands just up here. And you can play on site, and as enemies are rushing you, you can take advantage of it. So you want to walk into the center of this pillar. See here, this pillar. You want to walk right into the middle. Boom. And we're going to use the right corner of this part of our HUD line. And we're going to make that right corner touch this corner. This wall pillar right there. So I'll zoom in so you guys can see. And we throw the cage. Now, if I'm playing backside and enemies are pushing out, or pretend I'm the enemy, this is my perspective. I literally cannot see anything, especially if I'm going this way. And as I'm going over here, it's too late because you've already killed me. So it's a pretty nice one way you can do. When it comes to defending Link, it can be tough, especially if you don't have communication with your team. But let's say you want to place a tripwire just to watch it, and then you can prioritize A or you can prioritize B with your team. Then one simple tripwire you can do is literally kaboom. No one's going to get past. So you aim at this part of the door, and you'll get a nice tripwire like this. Enemies won't be able to push out. They won't be able to get into Link. They won't be able to push to B. They'll just be stuck here. So it's a pretty solid tripwire you can do. The only downside of this tripwire is, let's say your team doesn't have communication. An enemy can just wait here, and as your team's rotating, they can catch them off guard. So if you want to be extra safe, you can obviously place your tripwire a bit more inwards. But then again, enemies might be able to see that being placed if you're a little bit late, or they'll be able to hear it when they're around this area, especially after the Cypher nerfs. It's more clear to see where your tripwires are, so they'll be able to take advantage of it. So when you're playing Cypher, or when you put a tripwire mid, try and tell your teammates to avoid, you know, just rotating out in the open. Maybe you can tell one of your teammates to, you know, play reactive off this tripwire, so you can have a cage set up for them. So tell them as soon as someone hits the drip,
Cage triggered.
they can swing, they can get an easy kill, they can then run to here, or they can rotate back. So it's pretty good. Or what I like doing is I like having this tripwire and I like playing over here. So then I've got my setup on B and I can watch Link. So then my teammates can prioritize A and I can have one person pushing out into B main for a little bit of information. There's a pretty nice one way you can pair with this tripwire. So you want to walk into the center of this door and you see this door arch. We want to aim just a little bit above that arch. So we get into this door, we see the arch, we aim a little bit above it, we throw our cage. And you get a pretty nice cage, especially if you're playing around this area, you'll be able to see the enemy's feet as they cross. Or if you're playing a little bit further back, the enemy is going to be confused. Note, the higher you aim, the better your one-way cage is going to be. But don't aim too high, because in the tripwire, the cage will just bounce off and fall out. So if we aim a little bit higher, you see, if we aim way too high, cage bounces out.
Cage triggered.
But we get a pretty nice one-way, especially if we're playing here. Or if we're playing here and we're slightly crouched, enemies are not going to have a nice time. When it comes to B site, there's actually some insane cameras you can do, so I do suggest you note some of these down. The first one is if you stand on this edge and you are going to want to place your camera on this edge, like so. As high as you can get it, boom. So now you can see early B main vision. So anybody who's taking the orb, a lot of the time they're not going to notice this camera. And you can also see mid link. It's great for lower elo. In higher elo, they're probably going to, you know, they're going to adapt to this, or they're going to play a little bit slow, or they might place their own Cypher camera in this area to just clear it out, so he might see you. But this is also pretty solid. If you want a little bit more hidden, but also, you know, has the same impact, you're going to actually want to place your cam in this right side of this really far back tower. So, oof. Now you can see enemies that are crossing from B main, but you can also see Link. So it's a solid option, watching B site and Link at the same time. You know, you just have to go tush, 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 and you can clear it all out. One of my personal favorite cameras is this one like this. So you follow this horizontal line. As soon as it meets this vertical orange line, you place your camera. Why is this camera good? Because not only does it see B main, but it also sees me, and I cannot see the camera. So as an enemy, I'll be confused, and it's a one-way camera, especially if Link is your weak spot on this map, or enemies are like pushing it a lot. This camera will stop pushes, you know, so often. You can pair this camera with a nice little one-way cage. To do this one-way cage, you just basically want to, you see this line, that's where your cage is going to land. So aim a little bit above this line, above this ledge, and you can literally, you know, you got some nice cages going on there. And what's going to look like from your perspective, maybe you're playing over here, you see an enemy, activate the cage, spray. From the enemy's perspective,
Cage triggered.
they can't see you no matter what. And so you're going to get free kills. Even if they're inside, they're not going to have a nice time. You get some free kills. Let's say you didn't get a chance to place a one-way cage because you were too busy doing your setups. What you can do is you can stand in anywhere in this area. It's very easy. And you want your cage to bounce off of this. Ta-da! And then it's literally the same thing. So the cage bounces off the wall, lands on the ledge, and you got a free one-way cage you can do at any point in the round. Some other good cams you can do, you can place one just here on this wall. It just watches all of sight, so it's a very default cam. It's also hard for the enemies to break, because once they're actually on site, they'll be too focused on trying to find you and your tripwires. They might hit your tripwires. They're not going to turn around back and break the cam, because if they do, you can swing and kill them. So this cam is pretty good at that. You can also place your cam on this wall over here. So this watches all of sight. It also watches a bit of link, so maybe the enemies have gotten a bit of space. This cam will do just fine. Now when it comes to B, a lot of your tripwires, there's not much variation you can do, because people will expect, you know, typical tripwires like this. This is fine. You can obviously bring it a little bit more in if you want it harder to break. Something like this, but people kind of expect these tripwires. They're alright, especially if if the enemy team is just rushing in or they've got a neon, you know, that's fine. You can switch it up if you want. You can do something like this. A bit harder for them to break, especially if they're trying to shoot the typical spots a tripwire would be. They won't be able to get this one at the bottom. If the enemy team is trying to plant, you can actually place a tripwire just like this. So they usually like planting in this corner. Uh-oh. The tripwire is going to sting them. And with these setups, you kind of want to play here. It's going to be your best friend. Or you can play down here. This place is a little bit easier, so you can avoid KO knives. Because if the KO knife lands backside, you can just shoot it. Or if it lands at the front, you can shoot it. Just like this. We can play from here. Just be careful, enemies can wallbang you. If you don't want the enemy team to plant, you can do something like this. So no planting here. And you can then do, you know, just a simple trip like this. And you can play heaven with a cage. They hit your trip, boom, boom, boom. Hit the other trip, boom, boom, boom. They won't be able to see you, and you'll get free eliminations. If you're playing backside like this, then you can actually place a tripwire in this corner to completely prevent the plant, to completely prevent enemies pushing you this way. And if a neon is sliding, she's going to get and she's going to get flung all the way back. So this is a nice consistent trip. You can pair it with a cage like this. They hit the trip, boom. You can do trips like this if you want, to prevent enemies pushing sight this way. Or maybe link is your weak spot, right? Then you can place a tripwire like this. So enemies who are pushing out of link, not gonna have a nice time. If you want to surprise the enemy team, when the barrier goes down, you can actually place your tripwires a little bit further out, because enemies usually won't expect a tripwire to be right here. They'll be too busy trying to hold this angle, and they might pre-fire this, and then buzz, and then you can swing out and kill them. There's a nice one-way cage you can do, though it's very, very risky, is if you stay in the corner of this wall, and you see this line. If you aim in the center of this line and you throw your cage, you get a pretty nice one-way. For if you're playing backside like this, you can mow people down. Or if you're playing on-site like this, as they're crossing, you can mow them down like this. It is very risky because the barrier for the enemy team is also very close. So they'll be able to see you, you'll be able to see them. It'll be an awkward little standoff. But everything's worth the risk. When it comes to pushing A, so if you're attacking and you want to put a tripwire to watch your flank, you can do something like this. So, you know, boom. Enemies who are pushing out to mid, trying to flank you, Enemies pushing from B, So you can have literally one tripwire and you and your team can go A main. If you're pushing B site with your team, then you can do a nice tripwire like this. So it's head level, so no one can crouch or get past it, and your team can safely go B main, and enemies will get caught or they'll have to break it, and then you can turn around and kill them. If you're lurking as a Cypher, and I do suggest you lurk, I suggest that probably the best way to lurk is lurking from this area, because it's a lot safer. Enemies tend to have to push out of this to be able to see you. So you can pretty easily, you know, get into this position. You can slowly swing out. You can then clear. You can walk into link. Some cameras you can do if you want to watch your flank. Or maybe you've only got one trip, or just you want more vision. You can jump onto this box and you see this satellite dish. If you can place your camera on top of it, you can watch all of mid, which is pretty nice. So enemies walking around, peekaboo. If you want something that watches a bit of everything, then you can actually place your tripwire on this kind of chimney thing. But you gotta run and jump, so you gotta fall off when you do it. As high as you can. You watch a little bit of mid. You can watch some of Link. So if they've got, you know, a jet who's hovering with an op there. And you can also see, you know, a little bit further down Link, you can also see B site. So this is a pretty nice camera you can do. Especially if you're lurking, or you and your team are playing slow, or your team's going A and you just want to watch behind them. This is a beautiful camera. This video shows all the best Cypher setups that work to this day and that I've been using whenever I do get a chance to play Valorant. Very consistent, has worked in Immortal Radiant lobbies, but has also worked in lower Bronze Elo too. So do not worry about it. This setup is consistent for all ranks. I have made a slightly more in-depth guide last year, but this one is more up-to-date, suits the meta a little bit better. I have been absent. I'd like to apologize. It's been like 5 months since I've uploaded. I've been very busy. Work, university. But I've graduated now, so I've got all the time in the world. And I'll try and get more videos out, maybe once every 2 weeks now. A couple shorts here and there, as much as I can. But I've missed everyone. I've missed uploading. And I will see you guys in my next video, so thank you.